This is New Zealand, a land where human footprints arrived later than almost anywhere else on Earth. After more than 4 billion years of planetary change and upheaval, this place has managed to preserve a raw and untouched natural beauty. Unlike many parts of the world where cities dominate the landscape, New Zealand remains largely rural. People here live in harmony with the land, embracing a slower, quieter way of life. And here's something many people don't realize. Nearly 80% of New Zealand's land is completely uninhabited. New Zealand is an island nation in the South Pacific Ocean, covering 268,021 square kilometers. It lies about 1,600 kilometers southeast of Australia, and nearly 10,500 kilometers from the United States. The country consists of numerous small islands and 2 large ones, the North Island and the South Island, ranked 14th and 12th among the largest islands on Earth. If you've ever lived in the UK or Ireland, New Zealand's climate might feel strangely familiar. Mild summers, cool winters, and that constant breeze. That makes jackets essential, even in spring. Globally, this temperate maritime climate appears in places like Vancouver, Lima, Johannesburg, and southeastern Australia, most of which are heavily populated, but not here. Despite having a landmass larger than the UK, New Zealand is home to just 5.25 million people. By comparison, the UK fits nearly 67 million into a smaller space. Even smaller islands like Java, Honshu, or Great Britain have far higher population densities than New Zealand. So, why is New Zealand so sparsely populated? Not only do most people live on the North Island, but nearly half of them are concentrated in just one area, around Auckland. The South Island, although larger in area, is home to less than a quarter of the population. Auckland, in many ways, is an ideal location, built around natural harbors and dormant volcanoes, surrounded by fertile land and holding strategic geographic value. Today, Auckland alone is home to 37% of all New Zealanders, and its population is rapidly approaching 2 million. To understand this population imbalance, we need to look underground, literally. New Zealand lies on the collision point of 2 massive tectonic plates, the Pacific Plate and the Indo-Australian Plate. On the South Island, the Pacific Plate pushes westward, diving beneath the Indo-Australian Plate. This geological collision created the Southern Alps, a stunning mountain range stretching nearly 500 kilometers along the island. But this dramatic terrain leaves only a narrow strip of land for settlement on the western side. Meanwhile, dry winds blocked by the mountains make much of the eastern side difficult for farming or dense habitation. The North Island, by contrast, is flatter, warmer, and receives more consistent rainfall. Its volcanoes are still active, making the soil especially fertile, perfect for agriculture. While the South Island's volcanoes have been dormant for centuries, the North Island still experiences occasional eruptions, even today. Human history in New Zealand began around 700 years ago, when Polynesian explorers arrived and developed what we now call Māori culture. The first European to sight the islands was Abel Tasman in 1642. Later, in 1769, Captain James Cook became the first European to map and circumnavigate the islands. In 1840, the Treaty of Waitangi was signed between the British Crown and Māori chiefs, officially making New Zealand part of the British Empire. British settlers soon arrived in large numbers, bringing European law, ownership systems, and gradually displacing Maori control over the land. Colonial expansion continued throughout the 19th century. Maori communities were increasingly subjected to a foreign system of justice and culture. By the 20th century, more than 75% of New Zealanders lived on the North Island. Geography, infrastructure, and climate all played a role. Unlike countries like the UK or Japan that relied on industry and exports, New Zealand followed a different path. Its metal reserves ran dry in the 19th century. With little oil, few minerals, and long distances from consumer markets, manufacturing became uncompetitive. So what became New Zealand's economic strength? Not resources, but livestock. Thanks to its mild climate, open land, and rolling green hills, New Zealand became a global powerhouse in livestock farming. Today, sheep outnumber people by more than 5 to 1. In some places, you're more likely to meet a woolly local than a human being. New Zealand is the world's largest exporter of lamb and produces up to 125,000 tons of wool each year, about 8 to 9% of the global total. But it's not just sheep. Dairy farming is even bigger. With more than 4 million dairy cows, New Zealand produces over 15 million liters of milk annually. The country ranks 8th globally in milk production. The dairy giant Fonterra, based in New Zealand, handles nearly 30% of the world's dairy exports, generating revenues exceeding $22 billion. Amazingly, only 2% of New Zealand's land is considered suitable for cultivation. Yet more than 55% is used for agriculture, mostly for livestock, rather than crops. Like many developed countries, New Zealand's birth rate has been declining. In 2010, it stood at 2.1 children per woman, just enough to replace the population. By 2022, it had fallen to 1.8. That's still higher than places like Germany, Italy, Japan, or South Korea. But unlike those countries, New Zealand has long embraced immigration. It's essentially a nation of immigrants, primarily of European descent, since the 1840s. In recent decades, immigration has surged, particularly to large cities with modern infrastructure. Between 1996 and 2016, over half of all population growth occurred in Auckland alone. By 2022, the average house price in Auckland had risen above $1.1 million, while the average annual income remained around $44,000. In practical terms, that means it would take more than 25 years of income to buy a home, making Auckland one of the most expensive cities in the world relative to wages. So in the end, New Zealand is a country of contrasts. A large landmass, but a small population. Vast open spaces, but most people crowded into just a few regions. A place where much of the terrain is untouched, and likely always will be. The future of New Zealand lies in a delicate balance between growth and preservation. And in a world that seems to be accelerating every year, New Zealand stands as a quiet reminder. Sometimes, less is more.